This afternoon, violence erupts. Anti-lockdown protesters swarm cities across the country, but it was mayhem in Melbourne, flares thrown at police, officers knocked to the ground. Sydney's COVID record, 825 new cases, the city overwhelmed by Delta. And COVID fugitive, an infectious man refusing to isolate, a police manhunt now underway.
This is 7 News with Sally Bowery.
Good afternoon. Despite lockdown and defying COVID rules, thousands of anti-lockdown protesters have swarmed cities across the country, resulting in violent clashes with police. In Melbourne, it was ugly. Pepper spray was used to try and subdue the rowdy crowd, which at times charged at the police line with flares. A full report from Tegan Doling, who was there shortly. But first to New South Wales, which today recorded another 825 cases, the highest daily number seen in any state since the pandemic began. Live to Ashley Hansen in Sydney. Ash, despite the record number of cases, protesters still made their way into the city.
They sure did, Sally. Around 250 people attended an illegal protest near Victoria Park at Broadway. They were met by a heavy police presence. 1,400 officers were deployed across the city to target this rally. 38,000 cars were stopped and checked coming into the CBD. Ugly scenes unfolded shortly after midday as so-called freedom fighters tried to send a message to the government. An officer was injured as he attempted to arrest someone. He was treated by paramedics at the scene for a number of injuries. All of this played out on Delta's darkest day in Australia. New South Wales recording 825 new cases of COVID-19. 3 deaths were recorded up until 8 o'clock last night. 516 people are currently being treated for the virus in hospitals, with 85 patients in ICU. The Premier said while Sydney's south and southwest are bearing the brunt of the lockdown, they're suffering the most. 85% of the latest infections were from suburbs of concern, including Blacktown, Auburn, Guildford, Yagoona and Marylands.
No matter what any of us say, the Delta strain is like nothing Australia has seen before, and even in very strict and harsh lockdowns, the virus is spreading.
An illegal party here in Maroubra has also proven to be a super spreading event. Last Saturday night, up to 60 people attended a party. So far, 16 people have tested positive to COVID, and health officials expect more cases will follow. There are also grave concerns for rural communities across the state after a funeral with up to 500 mourners in Wilcannia is now linked to positive cases. Many of those mourners who attended the funeral have returned home and don't know whether they took the virus with them. With 825 new cases and at least 58 of those people infectious while they were in the community, there are no signs this outbreak has hit its peak. Sally?
Yep, the numbers aren't good. OK, thank you very much, Ash. Pepper spray was used by police in Melbourne after violence erupted in the CBD. Anti-lockdown protesters clashed with officers, at times charging through the police line. Tegan Doling was there when the chaos began.
Police tried to disperse the crowd early, but they were quickly outnumbered. They marched through the city and clashed at Parliament House. Police used capsicum spray, but nothing was deterring the angry mob. The protesters continued to grow into the thousands and snaked through the CBD, officers unable to keep up, with fears this could become a super spreader event. Freedom! Freedom! Chanting and letting off flares, it was at Flinders Street where things turned incredibly violent. Officers were pelted with glass and water bottles as the angry mob climbed onto the top of the tram station. Police officers injured and many of the protesters arrested. This was part of targeted protests right across Australia.
Melbourne's violent protests came after the announcement that regional Victoria would go back into hard lockdown after another surge in cases. The Premier has now introduced some of the strictest restrictions. Childcare will be limited and children urged to wear masks. Sarah Jones has more.
Any hopes of containing the current outbreak within Melbourne were dashed by a new and dangerous cluster that's emerged in Shepparton in the state's north. While restrictions had been relaxed outside the city, it meant all of regional Victoria was plunged into the same level of lockdown as Melbourne at 1 p.m, 2 hours after the Premier's press conference.
That's not a lot of notice. We fully acknowledge that. But this virus moves so fast. Essentially, it is the same rules applying across the state because we have virus across the whole state and we need to limit movement.
Of 77 cases today, 13 are mystery cases and only 22 were in isolation while infectious. It means even tighter restrictions for Melbourne as well. Parents in non-essential jobs can no longer send their children to childcare. Fewer workers will be allowed on site in high-risk industries, and it's now recommended that primary school-aged children wear masks.
If your child is able to do that, that will help protect them. It'll help protect those settings where transmission between kids occur. We are buying time. We are doing what we know works because a transmission saved today is 100 cases, 1,000 cases saved.
Victorians have been warned to expect more cases in coming days, but the Premier says there's still hope we can pull up this outbreak before it spreads too much further.
A large anti-lockdown crowd also gathered in Brisbane. In the north, restrictions are more relaxed, so masks aren't required outdoors. But the message from protesters was still the same. Anna McGraw reports.
Thousands of protesters are in the streets here in Brisbane this afternoon protesting against the COVID lockdowns less than 2 weeks after Brisbane's latest outbreak. It's part of a national movement rallying for peace, freedom and human rights. Also campaigning against the vaccine and the possibility it will become a requirement for freedom in the future.
Everybody's job's essential. Everyone has to take care of their families. Everyone's got bills to pay. Everyone's got to keep a roof over their heads.
This morning, Queensland's Chief Health Officer and Health Minister asked people to reconsider why they feel the need to protest.
If they are protests about the vaccine, or if you don't want to get vaccinated, stay home. Don't go out.
Today, Queensland recorded no new locally acquired cases, with 2 detected in hotel quarantine. Yesterday at 4 p.m, restrictions on mask wearing, community sport and gatherings at home were eased, with plenty out today making the most of relaxed rules.
Even if it isn't mandatory, it's really, really important that people continue to wear masks indoors in more crowded spaces.
More restrictions are set to ease next Friday afternoon if no more COVID cases are detected.
A COVID-positive man is on the run in Sydney, with police frantically trying to track him down. The 27-year-old is refusing to isolate and is now potentially spreading the virus across the city. Tom Saker reports.
This is the building in Wentworth Point where Anthony Karam is supposed to be isolating while he's infectious with COVID-19. Instead, he's on the run, and police say he has no intention of obeying public health orders. The 27-year-old was caught on elevator cameras without a mask, looking at himself in the mirror, as well as coughing, sneezing and spluttering. While New South Wales Health is usually reluctant to share details of individuals with COVID, this, they say, is a special case.
This 27-year-old chap, who apparently has expressed the view that he doesn't care less whether he spreads the virus.
Last night, 11 people were issued with infringement notices after police broke up a gathering at the Bondi Cliffs, putting those involved in handcuffs. And Cronulla Sharks player Josh Dugan is in hot water again for breaching public health orders, this time in Lithgow, where he told police he was going to feed animals at 11:30 last night. And today, SAFEWORK New South Wales inspectors are carrying out random checks at construction sites. They require evidence that all workers have checked in, had at least 1 dose of a vaccine or can provide a negative test result.
One of the most, I think, highest breaches are not having QR codes in place, which is why we've gone to sites and we've sent people home today.
Our camera was there while one of those workers was caught without any of that evidence. In the last 24 hours, police handed out 681 infringement notices and 400 people were found to be outside without a valid excuse.
Breaking news now, and 2 people have fallen from a cliff in Sydney. The pair plunged 6 metres at Balmoral. These pictures just in from the 7 News chopper. A 19-year-old man is in a critical condition. A 20-year-old female is stable. Both are being taken to hospital and cared for. Still to come in 7 News, Afghanistan crisis, the desperate scramble to escape the Taliban. President Biden now facing a firestorm. And pandemic property, Delta outbreaks force sales to go online. When will the market boom? First.